The Andromeda Exodus. Chapter 1, The Dying Light. The aurora borealis had become a nightly spectacle over Manhattan, its ethereal green curtains dancing where they had no right to be. Dr. Elena Vasquez pressed her palm against the observation deck's reinforced glass, watching the magnetic anomaly paint the sky in colors that spoke of Earth's approaching death. The field's strength dropped another 2% this month, she murmured to her colleague, Dr. James Chen, who stood beside her reviewing the latest magnetosphere readings on his tablet. The numbers told a story of inexorable decline. Earth's protective magnetic shield was collapsing, and with it, humanity's future. Below them, the Global Climate Response Center hummed with desperate activity. Scientists, engineers, and administrators worked around the clock, their faces illuminated by the blue glow of countless monitors displaying data that grew more alarming by the day. Solar radiation was penetrating deeper into the atmosphere, disrupting weather patterns and slowly sterilizing the planet's surface. At this rate, we have perhaps 30 years before the magnetic field reaches critical failure, Chen said, his voice carrying the weight of humanity's fate. Maybe 40 if we're incredibly fortunate. Elena nodded grimly. The signs were everywhere: crop failures in regions that had been fertile for millennia, mass extinctions as species failed to adapt to the rapidly changing magnetic environment, and most tellingly, the rising rates of radiation-induced cancers among the global population. Earth was dying, and humanity was running out of time. The Andromeda project had been conceived 3 years earlier, when it became clear that all attempts to stabilize or artificially regenerate Earth's magnetic field had failed. The world's brightest minds had turned their attention skyward, toward the one solution that might preserve human civilization: Exodus. The Kepler array detected another promising candidate last week, Elena said, pulling up the astronomical survey data on her own device. Kepler 442c in the Andromeda Galaxy. Twin suns, oxygen-rich atmosphere, vegetation signatures that suggest a thriving biosphere. Chen's eyes lit up with the first hope Elena had seen from him in months. Distance? 2.5 million light-years. With our current propulsion technology. She paused, running quick calculations. We're looking at a journey of approximately 800 years using conventional fusion drives. The number hung between them like a death sentence. No human alive today would see the new world. It would be their descendants, generations removed, who would take humanity's first steps on alien soil. The generation ship protocol, Chen whispered, referring to the theoretical framework that had been gathering dust in academic circles for decades. The concept was simple in theory but staggering in execution: build massive vessels capable of sustaining human civilization for centuries, launch them toward distant worlds, and trust that future generations would complete the mission their ancestors had begun. Elena pulled up the preliminary ship designs on the wall display. The vessel that materialized in holographic light was magnificent and terrifying in its scope, a city-sized ark capable of housing 50,000 people, complete with agricultural domes, manufacturing facilities, research laboratories, and everything needed to maintain human civilization during the long journey between the stars. Project Ark, she said, using the codename that had been assigned to humanity's most ambitious undertaking. Construction begins in 18 months. We'll need to build 5 ships to ensure genetic diversity and redundancy. The logistics were staggering. Every aspect of human knowledge would need to be preserved and transmitted across centuries. Social structures would need to evolve to maintain stability during a journey that would span dozens of generations. Children would be born, live, and die aboard the ships, never knowing the feeling of standing on a planet's surface. Who chooses who goes? Chen asked the question that had been haunting the project's leadership since its inception. Elena's expression darkened. The Global Selection Committee is still debating criteria. Scientific expertise, genetic diversity, psychological stability, age, reproductive potential, every factor you can imagine is being weighed and measured. The ethical implications were crushing. They were essentially deciding who among Earth's 8 billion inhabitants deserved to continue the human story. The rest would remain behind, to live out their lives on a dying world, watching the sky grow increasingly hostile as the magnetic field continued its inexorable collapse. A soft chime indicated an incoming priority message. Elena's tablet displayed an urgent communication from the Deep Space Observatory Network. New data had arrived from the Kepler array, and it was marked for immediate review by the Andromeda Project leadership. "What is it?" Chen asked, noting the change in Elena's expression as she read. "Kepler 442c, she said slowly, her voice filled with wonder. "The spectral analysis confirms it, chlorophyll signatures in the atmosphere. There's definitely plant life, possibly complex ecosystems. The oxygen levels are even higher than our initial estimates suggested." For the first time in months, Elena felt something approaching hope. Kepler 442c wasn't just a potential refuge, it was a living world, a place where humanity might not merely survive but thrive. "We need to call an emergency session of the Andromeda Council," she said, already moving toward the communication center. "This changes everything. We're not just looking for a new home anymore, we may have found paradise." As they walked through the corridors of the response center, passing rooms filled with the desperate energy of humanity's final gambit, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that they were standing at the threshold of the greatest adventure in human history. Behind them lay a dying world, ahead lay the vast emptiness of intergalactic space, and beyond that, perhaps, a new Eden waiting to be claimed. The aurora borealis continued its ghostly dance outside, beautiful and terrible, a reminder that time was running out. But for the first time since the magnetic crisis had begun, Elena Vasquez dared to believe that humanity might have a future among the stars. Chapter 2: The Selection. The Grand Assembly Hall in Geneva had never hosted a gathering quite like this one. Representatives from every nation, faith, and major organization on Earth sat in tense silence as the Global Selection Committee prepared to announce the criteria that would determine humanity's future. Elena Vasquez sat in the section reserved for Project Arc's scientific leadership, her hands folded tightly in her lap as she waited for the proceedings to begin. Dr. Amara Okafor, the Selection Committee's chairwoman, approached the podium with the bearing of someone who carried the weight of 8 billion souls. Her voice echoed through the hall's advanced acoustics system as she began to speak. "Ladies and gentlemen, we gather today not to celebrate human achievement, but to confront our species' greatest challenge. The magnetic field that has protected Earth for millions of years is failing, and we must face the reality that our home world has perhaps 3 decades of habitability remaining." A murmur rippled through the assembly. Though everyone present knew the facts, hearing them stated so plainly still carried the power to shock. Project Arc will construct 5 generation ships, each capable of carrying 50,000 individuals. This means that from Earth's current population of 8.2 billion people, only 250,000 will join the exodus to Kepler 442c. The mathematics of survival were brutal. Less than 1 person in 30,000 would escape Earth's fate. Dr. Okafor continued, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was announcing. The selection process will operate under 5 primary criteria. First, genetic diversity. We must ensure that the founding population carries the full spectrum of human genetic heritage. Second, essential skills. Each ship must contain individuals capable of maintaining our technology, growing food, providing medical care, and preserving human knowledge. Third, psychological resilience. The journey will span 25 generations, requiring individuals capable of adapting to enclosed environments and maintaining social stability. Fourth, age demographics. We need a population structure that can sustain itself across centuries. Fifth, reproductive potential. Our survival depends on successful population growth during the journey. Elena found herself mentally calculating the implications. The selection process would favor young, healthy, educated individuals with diverse backgrounds and proven mental stability. It was logical, necessary, and absolutely heartbreaking. Each nation will nominate candidates based on these criteria, Dr. Okafor announced. Regional committees will conduct comprehensive evaluations including genetic screening, psychological assessment, skills testing, and compatibility analysis. The final selection will be completed 18 months from today, 6 months before the first ship launches. A delegate from Brazil stood and was recognized to speak. Dr. Okafor, what provision is being made for families? Will spouses and children of selected individuals be automatically included? The question hung in the air like a blade. Elena could see the pain in Dr. Okafor's eyes as she responded. Family units will be considered as complete packages where possible, but individual merit remains the primary factor. We cannot guarantee that all family members will qualify for selection. The moral complexity was staggering. They were asking people to potentially abandon their loved ones for the chance to preserve humanity. Some families would be selected together, others would be torn apart by the demands of survival. A representative from the European Union raised her hand. What about children born during the selection process? What about those who won't be born for years but will be alive when the ships launch? All children born to selected individuals between now and launch will be included, Dr. Okafor replied. For others, emergency protocols allow for last-minute additions if circumstances warrant, but spaces are strictly limited. Elena thought about her own situation. At 38, she was at an ideal age for selection, young enough to contribute for decades, old enough to possess crucial expertise. Her genetic profile was excellent, her psychological evaluations consistently showed high stability scores, and her role in the Andromeda project made her selection virtually certain. But her elderly parents, her sister with the chronic illness, her best friend who worked as an artist rather than a scientist, none of them would meet the ruthless criteria of survival. Dr. Sarah Kim, the project's chief geneticist, stood to address the assembly. I want to emphasize the genetic diversity requirement. We need individuals from every major population group on Earth. This isn't about nationality or ethnicity in the traditional sense, it's about ensuring that our founding population carries the full range of human genetic adaptations. We're essentially creating a new branch of human evolution. The implications were profound. The colonists wouldn't just be leaving Earth, they would be leaving behind the genetic legacy of the vast majority of their species. The humans who eventually walked on Kepler 442c would be descended from a carefully curated sample of Earth's population. A delegate from India asked about religious and cultural preservation. How will we maintain human cultural heritage during a journey spanning centuries? Dr. Marcus Webb, the project's anthropologist, fielded this question. Each ship will carry comprehensive cultural archives, literature, music, art, religious texts, historical records, and scientific knowledge. We're essentially building digital repositories of human civilization. More importantly, we're selecting individuals who represent the full spectrum of human cultural traditions. Elena realized they weren't just planning humanity's physical survival, they were trying to preserve the essence of what made humans human. The ships would need to maintain cultural diversity while fostering the unity necessary for such a challenging journey. The session continued for hours, with delegates raising increasingly difficult questions about ethics, logistics, and long-term planning. How would they prevent genetic bottlenecks over 25 generations? What systems would govern the ships during the journey? How would they prepare the colonists for a world they had never seen? As the assembly concluded, Elena found herself in conversation with Dr. Chen and several other project leaders. The reality of what they were undertaking was beginning to sink in. We're not just selecting colonists, Chen observed. We're choosing the parents of a new branch of humanity. The people we select will determine what humans become after they reach Kepler 442c. Elena nodded, feeling the enormous responsibility settling on her shoulders. And we're asking them to make the ultimate sacrifice, leaving behind everything and everyone they've ever known for a destination they'll never see. Dr. Kim joined their conversation, her expression thoughtful. I keep thinking about the children who will be born during the journey. They'll grow up knowing that their entire existence is dedicated to a mission they didn't choose. How do we prepare them psychologically for that burden? It was a question that would haunt the project for months to come. How do you raise generations of people whose entire purpose is to complete a journey started by their ancestors? How do you maintain hope and purpose across centuries of travel through empty space? As Elena left the assembly hall, she looked up at the evening sky, already showing the unnatural aurora that had become Earth's nightly reminder of its approaching death. Somewhere beyond those lights, invisible to the naked eye, lay the Andromeda Galaxy and the world that would become humanity's new home. The selection process would begin tomorrow, and with it, the most difficult chapter in human history. They would choose who lived and who died, who continued the human story and who would be left behind to write its final chapter on Earth. But tonight, for just a moment, Elena allowed herself to imagine what it would be like to stand under an alien sky, to breathe air that had never known human lungs, to be part of the generation that gave humanity a second chance among the stars. Chapter 3, Blueprints of Hope. The construction yards floating in Earth's L1 Lagrange point had become humanity's most ambitious industrial project. Elena stood in the observation deck of the orbital assembly station, watching as thousands of robotic fabricators worked around the clock to birth the vessels that would carry human civilization to the stars. The lead ship, designated Arc-1 New Genesis, was taking shape in the primary construction bay. At 15 kilometers long and 5 kilometers in diameter, it dwarfed every structure humanity had ever built. The ship's rotating habitat rings were already complete, their agricultural bays glowing with the soft blue light of growing plants under LED arrays that mimicked Earth's sun. The fusion reactors came online yesterday, reported Chief Engineer David Park, joining Elena at the observation window. We're running at full power now. The magnetic containment fields are performing within acceptable parameters. Elena nodded, reviewing the technical specifications on her tablet. Each ship required 3 massive fusion reactors to power its systems during the 800-year journey. The engineering challenges were staggering. Every component had to be built to last centuries, with comprehensive redundancy and self-repair capabilities. "What's the status on the closed-loop life support systems?" she asked. "Running at 98% efficiency," Park replied with satisfaction. "The atmospheric processors are maintaining perfect oxygen-nitrogen balance, and the water reclamation systems are exceeding design specifications. We could theoretically support 60,000 people instead of the planned 50,000. The life support systems represented perhaps the most critical aspect of the ship's design. For 8 centuries, the colonists would breathe recycled air and drink recycled water. Every molecule would need to be conserved and reprocessed countless times. The margin for error was essentially zero. Dr. Lisa Rodriguez, the project's agricultural specialist, approached with a data pad showing the latest crop yields from the prototype farming modules. "The vertical farming arrays are producing excellent results," she reported. "We're getting higher yields per square meter than most Earth-based farms, and the nutritional content is actually superior thanks to our controlled growing conditions." Elena studied the agricultural data with interest. Each ship would carry genetic samples from thousands of Earth plant species, but the actual food production would rely on carefully selected crops optimized for space-based cultivation. Rice, wheat, soybeans, potatoes, and various vegetables would form the backbone of the colonists' diet, supplemented by protein from lab-grown meat and fish raised in aquaculture systems. "Have we resolved the pollination issues?" Elena asked. "We're using a combination of engineered bees and manual pollination protocols," Rodriguez replied. "The bee colonies are adapting well to the artificial environment, and we have backup plans using robotic pollinators if biological systems fail." The complexity of maintaining Earth-based ecosystems in space was mind-boggling. Every biological process that occurred naturally on Earth had to be carefully engineered and monitored aboard the ships. They were essentially building self-contained worlds that could sustain themselves for centuries. Dr. Chen joined the group, carrying the latest reports from the psychological preparation teams. "We've been working with the selected colonists on adaptation protocols," he said. "The biggest challenge is helping them mentally prepare for a journey they'll never see completed." Elena understood the psychological complexity they faced. The colonists would need to maintain purpose and hope across generations, passing down the mission's importance to children who would never know Earth or see their destination. Social structures would need to evolve to handle this unique situation. "What about governance?" Elena asked. "How will we maintain social order across 25 generations?" Dr. Maria Santos, the project's political scientist, had been working on this challenge for months. We're implementing a hybrid system, she explained. Democratic councils for day-to-day governance, but with constitutional mandates protecting the core mission. No generation can vote to abandon the journey or fundamentally alter the ship's purpose. The political implications were fascinating and troubling in equal measure. They were creating societies that would exist solely to complete a mission, with built-in restrictions on future generations' ability to choose their own destiny. Park directed their attention to the ship's propulsion system, visible through the transparent aluminum viewing port. The fusion ramjet engines were massive, designed to accelerate the ships to a significant fraction of light speed and maintain that velocity for centuries. The propulsion tests exceeded our expectations, he said with pride. We can reach 12% of light speed, which cuts the journey time from our original estimates. We're looking at 750 years instead of 800. Elena felt a surge of hope. 50 years might not seem like much in the context of such a long journey, but it represented 2 fewer generations who would have to carry the burden of the mission. It was a significant improvement. What about the navigation systems? She asked. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the project's astrophysicist, answered. The quantum navigation arrays are functioning perfectly. We have continuous lock on Kepler 442c, and the AI navigation systems can adjust course automatically to account for gravitational anomalies during the journey. The navigation challenge was unique in human experience. The ships would travel through regions of space that had never been mapped, facing gravitational fields from unseen objects and cosmic phenomena that could alter their course. The navigation systems had to be capable of autonomous operation for centuries, with backup systems and multiple redundancies. Elena turned her attention to the cultural preservation modules, where teams were working to digitize and protect human knowledge and culture. How's the data archival project progressing? Dr. Webb looked up from his workstation, where he was reviewing digitization protocols. We're on schedule to complete the cultural archives before launch. Every book, every piece of music, every work of art, every scientific paper, it's all being preserved in quantum storage arrays with multiple redundancies. The cultural archives represented humanity's memory, carefully preserved for the generations who would carry civilization to the stars. Languages, religions, philosophies, scientific knowledge, artistic traditions, everything that made humans human would travel aboard the ships. We're also implementing active cultural programs, Webb continued. Each ship will have dedicated spaces for religious worship, artistic creation, and cultural celebrations. We need to ensure that human culture doesn't just survive the journey but continues to evolve. Elena felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders again. They weren't just building ships, they were creating the foundations of a new human civilization. Every decision they made would echo across centuries, shaping the development of humanity's branch among the stars. As she looked out at the construction yards, watching the birth of humanity's greatest achievement, Elena realized that they were doing more than escaping Earth's fate. They were taking the next great leap in human evolution, transforming from a single-planet species into interstellar travelers. The ships taking shape before her weren't just vessels, they were arcs carrying the hopes, dreams, and potential of the human species toward a new world where humanity could begin again. In 750 years, their descendants would walk on alien soil under the light of twin suns, carrying with them the best of what Earth had been and the promise of what humanity could become. Chapter 4, The Final Days. The global communications network hummed with a mixture of celebration and grief as launch day approached. Elena stood in the embarkation center at the L1 staging area, watching the final groups of colonists arrive from Earth. Each transport shuttle brought 50 individuals who had won the ultimate lottery, survival, while leaving behind billions who would face Earth's dying years alone. The last 18 months had been a whirlwind of preparation, training, and heartbreak. The selection process had unfolded with ruthless efficiency, identifying the 250,000 individuals who would carry human civilization to the stars. Medical exams, psychological evaluations, genetic screenings, and compatibility assessments had winnowed Earth's population down to those deemed most likely to succeed in humanity's greatest gamble. Transport Shuttle Charlie 7 requesting docking clearance, came the voice over the communications system. Elena watched through the viewport as another shuttle approached, carrying the final agricultural specialists assigned to Arc 3. Each arrival brought them closer to the moment of departure, the point of no return that would sever humanity's ties to its birth world forever. Dr. Sarah Kim approached with a tablet showing the final genetic diversity calculations. "We've achieved excellent genetic representation," she reported. Each ship carries individuals from every major population group on Earth, with sufficient diversity to prevent bottlenecking over 25 generations. Elena nodded, though she knew the statistics couldn't capture the human cost of their success. Every selected individual had been forced to leave family members behind, to abandon friends and loved ones for the chance to preserve the species. The psychological toll was immeasurable. "What's the status on the cultural preparation programs?" Elena asked. Dr. Webb, who had been coordinating the cultural integration efforts, looked up from his workstation. "The colonists have completed their intensive training on ship society protocols. We've established cultural councils for each major tradition, religious groups have selected their spiritual leaders for the journey, and the educational frameworks are in place for passing knowledge to the next generation." The social engineering required for the mission was as complex as the technological challenges. The ships would need to maintain stable societies for centuries, preserving human knowledge and culture while adapting to the unique constraints of their environment. Children born aboard the ships would need to understand their role in the greater mission while developing their own identity as spaceborne humans. Elena's communicator chimed with an incoming message from Earth. She opened the video link to see her sister Maria's face, streaked with tears but trying to maintain composure. "Elena, I wanted to talk one more time before." Maria's voice broke slightly. "I'm proud of what you're doing. You're giving humanity a future, even if some of us can't be part of it." Elena felt her own tears threatening. Maria's autoimmune condition had disqualified her from selection, despite her brilliant mind and loving heart. The decisions that had to be made for species survival were not always compatible with individual justice. "I wish things were different," Elena replied. "I wish we could take everyone, or that Earth's magnetic field would stabilize, or that we had more time to find better solutions. But this is the reality we have," Maria said with forced strength. "You go to the stars, Elena. Make sure humanity remembers Earth and everyone who stayed behind." Similar conversations were occurring across the station as colonists said final goodbyes to loved ones who would remain on Earth. The communication systems were overloaded with video calls, messages, and digital farewells that carried the weight of permanent separation. Chief Engineer Park's voice echoed through the station's public address system. All colonists assigned to Arc 1 New Genesis should report to their designated embarkation areas. Launch sequence begins in 6 hours. Elena gathered her personal belongings, a small collection of items that represented her connection to Earth. A photograph of her family, a piece of her grandmother's jewelry, a pressed flower from her childhood garden, and a small vial of soil from the place where she was born. Each colonist was allowed 5 kilograms of personal items, small reminders of the world they were leaving behind. The embarkation areas buzzed with nervous energy as 50,000 people prepared to board the ship that would be their home for the rest of their lives. Elena recognized faces from the training programs: Dr. Jackson, who would oversee the ship's medical facilities, Engineer Martinez, who specialized in fusion reactor maintenance, Teacher Thompson, who would educate the first generation of spaceborne children. "Attention all personnel," came another announcement. "Final systems checks are complete. All 5 ships are fully operational and cleared for departure. Colonists should proceed to their assigned living quarters immediately after boarding." Elena took her place in the boarding queue, looking around at the faces of humanity's chosen representatives. They came from every continent, every culture, every major field of human knowledge and expertise. Together, they carried the hopes of 8 billion people who would never see the stars. The boarding process moved with efficient precision. Elena found herself assigned to Habitat Ring 3, Section 7, Compartment 247. Her living space was compact but well-designed: a small bedroom, a work area with communication access, and storage for her personal belongings. The walls displayed gentle lighting that mimicked Earth's day-night cycle, and a small viewport offered a view of the stars they would travel toward. As Elena settled into her new home, she activated the communication system and accessed the ship's central information network. The magnitude of their undertaking was displayed in real-time data streams, life support systems, navigation coordinates, propulsion status, and psychological support resources for colonists adjusting to their new reality. "All hands, this is Captain Morrison," came the announcement that would mark the beginning of humanity's greatest journey. "We are cleared for departure. In 30 minutes, we will activate the main engines and begin our journey to Kepler 442c. This moment marks not an end, but a beginning, the first chapter of humanity's future among the stars." Elena moved to her viewport and looked back at Earth one final time. The planet appeared as a blue marble suspended against the black of space, its surface already showing the effects of the failing magnetic field. Aurora displays danced across both poles, beautiful and terrible reminders of the crisis that had driven humanity from its birth world. The gentle vibration of the fusion engines coming online thrummed through the ship's structure. Elena felt the subtle acceleration as New Genesis began its long journey, following a trajectory that would carry it through empty space toward the distant Andromeda galaxy. Around her, 50,000 people were beginning the same realization: they were no longer citizens of Earth. They were citizens of the ship, members of a new branch of humanity that would spend centuries traveling between the stars. Their children would be born in space, would grow up knowing only the ship's corridors and chambers, would carry the mission forward toward a world they could barely imagine. As Earth dwindled behind them and the stars grew brighter ahead, Elena felt the profound shift from ending to beginning. They were no longer fleeing a dying world, they were traveling toward a new one, carrying with them everything precious about human civilization and the hope of giving it a fresh start under alien suns. The great journey had begun. Chapter 5: Life Between the Stars. 47 years into the journey, Elena Vasquez looked out through the observation deck's vast windows at the star field that had become humanity's new sky. At 85, she was among the eldest of the original colonists still alive, one of the dwindling number who remembered Earth's blue skies and natural sunlight. The Arc 1 New Genesis had become a world unto itself, its 15 kilometers of corridors and chambers bustling with the life of over 55,000 people. The population had grown steadily during the journey as children were born and families formed, creating the first generations of true space dwellers. "Grandmother Elena, tell us about the old world again," requested 7-year-old Marcus Chinocafor, his dark eyes bright with curiosity. He was one of Elena's great-grandchildren, descended from the union of families that had formed during the early years of the journey. Elena settled into her chair in the education center, surrounded by a group of children who represented the ship's third generation. To them, the metal corridors and recycled air of the ship were as natural as Earth's forests and oceans had been to Elena's generation. Earth was a world of endless skies, Elena began, her voice carrying the weight of memory. The sky changed color throughout the day, blue in the morning, sometimes gray with clouds that brought rain, brilliant orange and red at sunset. And at night, you could see thousands of stars, but they were so far away they looked like tiny points of light. Young Sarah Martinez raised her hand. "But why didn't they build ships like ours on Earth? Why did they live on the ground?" Elena smiled at the question that revealed how completely the children had adapted to shipborne life. Earth's gravity held everything down, and there was air to breathe everywhere. People could walk outside without suits, feel wind on their faces, smell flowers growing in the soil. The children listened with fascination to descriptions of a world that seemed as mythical to them as ancient legends had seemed to Elena's generation. They were developing their own culture, their own understanding of what it meant to be human, shaped by the unique environment of their mobile world. Dr. Kim's great-grandson, now Dr. Robert Kim and the ship's chief geneticist, joined Elena after the storytelling session. "The genetic diversity analysis for the third generation looks excellent," he reported. "We're maintaining healthy genetic variation, and the population is growing at sustainable rates." Elena nodded with satisfaction. One of their greatest fears had been genetic bottlenecking as the small founding population produced offspring. Careful monitoring and genetic counseling had so far prevented any serious problems. "What about psychological adaptation?" Elena asked. Dr. Lisa Park Thompson, the ship's chief psychologist and daughter of the original chief engineer Park, provided an update. The third generation shows remarkable adaptation to ship life. They're developing cultural traditions we never anticipated, new forms of art, music, and social organization based on their spaceborne experience. Indeed, the ship had evolved its own unique culture over 5 decades. The Ring Festivals celebrated the completion of each orbit around the ship's central axis. Children played games that involved navigation through 3-dimensional spaces that would have bewildered ground dwellers. Artists created sculptures and paintings inspired by the beauty of deep space and the ship's mechanical architecture. Elena walked through the ship's central plaza, a vast open space surrounded by shops, restaurants, and community centers. The dome overhead displayed a simulation of Earth's sky, but increasingly, the residents requested views of their current location in space, watching the slow dance of distant galaxies as they traveled between the stars. Elena, called Captain Morrison's daughter, now Captain Sarah Morrison, who had assumed command of the ship 15 years earlier when her father retired. We need to discuss the navigation update. They moved to the bridge, where the ship's sophisticated AI systems continuously monitored their progress toward Kepler 442c. The journey was proceeding ahead of schedule. They had managed to increase their velocity slightly beyond original projections and were now expected to arrive in approximately 700 years rather than the original 750. The deep space sensors are detecting interesting gravitational anomalies ahead, Captain Morrison reported. Nothing dangerous, but possibly indicating previously unknown stellar objects along our route. Elena studied the navigation displays with interest. Space between galaxies was not as empty as they had originally believed. The ship's instruments regularly detected dark matter concentrations, rogue planets, and other phenomena that wouldn't be visible from Earth-based telescopes. Have we maintained communication with the other ships? Elena asked. All 5 ships are maintaining course and reporting healthy populations, the captain replied. Arc 3 experienced some reactor difficulties 20 years ago, but they've resolved the issues. Arc 5 actually has the largest population now. They've been very successful with their agricultural programs. The 5 ships of humanity's exodus maintained contact across the vast distances of space, sharing information and providing mutual support during the long journey. Each ship was developing its own unique characteristics and culture while remaining part of the greater human diaspora. Elena visited the ship's memorial garden, where they honored the original colonists who had died during the journey. Her own name would soon join those remembered walls, but she felt satisfaction knowing that the mission continued successfully. The ship's population was healthy, growing, and well adapted to their unique environment. In the agricultural bays, she watched children learning to tend the hydroponic gardens that fed the ship's population. The farming techniques had evolved far beyond what they had started with, incorporating innovations developed during the journey. Some crops were producing varieties that had never existed on Earth, adapted to the ship's specific growing conditions. We're not the same humans who left Earth, Elena reflected to Dr. Kim during one of their regular conversations. The children born here are adapted to this environment in ways we never anticipated. Dr. Kim nodded thoughtfully. The gravity differential from the rotating sections, the recycled atmosphere, the 3-dimensional living spaces, they're creating physical and mental adaptations. By the time we reach Kepler 442c, we'll essentially be a new branch of humanity. This realization both thrilled and concerned Elena. They were preserving human civilization, but they were also changing it in fundamental ways. The humans who would eventually colonize Kepler 442c would carry Earth's legacy but would be shaped by centuries of unique evolutionary pressure. As Elena prepared for sleep in her quarters, she looked out at the eternal stars and thought about the world awaiting them in the far future. The ship's telescopes had detected more detailed information about Kepler 442c over the decades, confirmation of complex weather patterns, seasonal changes that suggested axial tilt, and atmospheric compositions that indicated a thriving biosphere. Somewhere ahead in the vast darkness, a world with twin suns was waiting for humanity's arrival. the children sleeping in the ship's quarters would grow up, have children of their own, and pass the mission forward through generations yet unborn. Eventually, humans would again walk on planetary surfaces, breathe unprocessed air, and feel the warmth of natural sunlight. But they would do so as the inheritors of both Earth's legacy and the ship's unique culture, carrying with them the experience of 7 centuries among the stars. Elena fell asleep to the gentle hum of the ship's systems, content in the knowledge that humanity's greatest adventure was proceeding exactly as hoped, not just as a journey of survival, but as the birth of something entirely new.